as we're preparing today, and this is very important that I say prepare because you guys are going to hear the word prepare throughout this whole message. And I'm hoping that it's a blessing to some of you who are here. But today we're going to talk about the God who prepares us. And when I mean to say that God who prepares us, that's not to take away the God who is God above all things. That's not to take away that he is God before everything. It's to make a point that God prepares you, and God prepares me, and God prepares all of us to undertake the work that we are doing currently in this space. In Scripture, God begins everything with preparation. And this is a divine algebraic equation, if you want to speak about it in that terms. And I like to speak about it in that terms because algebra is logic, and God is a very logical God. And a lot of times this divine algebra is something that we miss because we're so busy trying to remember the stories that we don't realize that there's truth in the formulaic nature of God in our lives. Now, a lot of you have heard of the term cause and effect. And in other words, there is a cause to everything that happens, and there's an effect, and they're all attached together. And scientists like to call this a law. Well, whenever I speak about divine algebra, I speak about divine algebra in terms of what God does, and God prepares us often before it's time for us to carry out what we need to do. I need us to go to Isaiah chapter 40. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3 through 5. When you got it, say amen. A little hack. I know a lot of you, and I say this all the time, a lot of you have the Bible app, but sometimes you have to click here, click here, click here. A lot of you are Googling throughout the message anyways. Just type in Isaiah 40 and it'll pop up. It's real easy. And we're going to start reading at 3 through 5. The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low. And the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. Preparation. Notice the order in this verse. It says, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Prepare ye the way first. And then it says, and then the glory of God shall be revealed. Prepare and then the glory. Let me say it again. Prepare and then the glory. And when we talk in these terms, this is the divine algebra I'm talking about. Our preparation and then the glory of God is shown. Preparation precedes manifestation, if you want to speak about it in terms like that. We want God to reveal what he's doing all the time. But the fact is, a lot of times we're in that mode where we're preparing and we have to wait and we have to see what he's doing. We want the promise sometimes, but God prepares the person who's going to carry out the promise. So sometimes, yes, you have to wait. A lot of us get really excited about what God is going to do, and then all of a sudden a year passes, and a second year passes, and a third year passes, and you said, but I had a promise before, and God gave me a vision, or God put in me the ability to do this, and then you're in this waiting period. But the fact is that you may be in the waiting period because you're not ready for that yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what growing up is about. Talk about divine algebra. Growing up has its pains. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, there was a TV show called Growing Pains. And if you know what growing pains is, it's the fact that when you grow, there's pain points throughout your growth. And they speak about it in terms of medically, you've heard it. You know, you grow, these are growing pains. You go to the doctor, oh, those are just growing pains, you know, things like that. But the fact is that throughout our lives, we experience growing pains and points of pains and things that get in the way as we're getting older. Junior high is one of them. The yellow school bus is one of them. Those situations all abound throughout our lives. As a matter of fact, some of you, a pain point might be obedience or listening to your parents or always getting in trouble. A lot of people always get in trouble and then all of a sudden stop getting in trouble. And a lot of that is because you're preparing. Now, some of you might say that, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm just shaking out the silliness or getting it all out. But the fact is that God works to prepare us for something. And even though you may know what it is, it doesn't mean that you're ready for it. I work with youth. It's been my thing. Above that, I've been working at school districts for like 20 years. So I'm surrounded with young people. And let me tell you this. Young people don't know anything. It's like they don't. And I can say that being someone that was young, that we don't know. We believe we do, or we believe we might know what's best, but we don't really understand consequences and actions and those kind of things. Every time I talk to a young person who has had a situation, I kind of say, I'm kind of always flabbergasted that I can't just say things like, duh, of course this happened to you. You did this and it led to this. Another divine algebra, if you will. But whenever we start thinking about what it is to grow up and these growing pains, at one point we do come face to face with our Creator, or we come to the Lord, or we come and have the opportunity to find out about God. And then God puts this passion in us and this drive, and He saves us, and all of a sudden we're ready. Let me tell you this. The first day I ever visited this church 20-something years ago was the first day I said that I would be preaching one day. And I said it to the pastor's wife, like almost like came out of my mouth like I knew what I was talking about. And I didn't. And I even when I said it, I was like, why did I say that? And then she said, glory to God. And I said, yeah, I'm excited about the possibility of one day preaching. And I wasn't even Christian yet. And it was just coming out of my mouth. And it was like one of these dialogues I was having with him. It was like, why did I say that? It's like, why do I keep saying it? Why do I keep doing this? What am I telling to this person? They're going to expect this. Well, let me tell you this. That was a long time coming. That was 20-something years ago. It was 10 years, I think, about 6 years before I got my first opportunity to preach. But it is important for us to realize that God prepares us where we are. That's my first point. God prepares us where we are. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 19. Chapter 19, verse 19 through 21, and it reads this. So he departed thence and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he was the 12th. And Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle upon him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah. And he said, Let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow thee. And he said unto him, Go back again, for what have I done to thee? And he returned back from him and took a yoke of oxen and slew them and boiled their flesh with the instruments of the oxen and gave unto the people, and they did eat. Then he arose and went after Elijah and ministered unto him. We got to first look at the setting here. We got to look at where Elisha finds Elijah. Elisha was in a field. He was working. He was plowing. He was doing what was in front of him. And while Elisha was working the ground, God was working on Elisha. You see, while this guy was plowing, now, if you know anything about farming or anything like that, very difficult. It's a hard day's work. It's probably one of the hardest things to do. You wake up when the sun comes up, if not earlier, and you start doing the work. And when you're plowing, he had 12 oxen. Like you're plowing, you're going behind and you're going line by line down. Now, think about this. You know how nowadays everybody owns like 12 acres and 10 acres and things like that? Well, back then there was probably less people, and whoever owned probably owned a lot more. So think more in terms of 200 and 300 acres, 400, 500. Think about a whole state. And just think about that, and think about this man just plowing away, and then going through every line slowly and making sure. And here's the thing, you think it's something easy, but let's say one of the oxen doesn't move, or once he starts going a certain way, there is issues in farm animals sometimes that cause them to not be paying attention or to do something, or say one of them just decides to stop. Or let's say there's a big soil or rock in the way. There are so many things that can cause this process to stop, but where God finds us is where we're meant to be. It's where God knows that we can have an impact. And he found him plowing on the field. Elisha saw work. God saw purpose in the work. You see, this man was just plowing away. And if you think of what plowing is, what is plowing at the very heart of things? It's preparation. It's preparing the land. It's making things ready for growth. So this is not just an example of a biblical story. This is a metaphor for what his life was, a life of preparation, getting ready. And who knows how long he was there. Now, everything indicates that he was a rich man because he had 12 oxen. Had everything he wanted. So this was not just a person who was a farmhand. This was someone of some sort of status that had access to these things. And he was still there doing the work, working hard. How many of you have met people or ministers or people that have a vision that all of a sudden they go from one spectrum to the other, and all of a sudden they expect the glory of God to come right away without preparing? Now, I've met, one thing about young people, they're very ambitious. You know, young people are very ambitious. I've met hundreds throughout my time, and I've met very ambitious youth. Are very ambitious young people who want to do something, who want to, for lack of better terms, take over or take position and do those things. And some of them have just walked through the door. Now, let me tell you this. It doesn't mean that they're not going in that direction. It just means that they are barely in one phase of the preparation. And they could easily spend 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years before they're ready for what God had already put in them since the very beginning. The important thing is that they were found by God, and that he found them where they were. And that's something to be excited about. And one of the reasons we need to be excited about it is because, well, I'll be frank, where have you been in your life? And I'm talking to those people who pre-Christian, all that. Where have you come from? What places did you inhabit? What places outside of God were you involved in? And some of us still putting ourselves in those things. God finds us. God finds us where we're at. He's ready to fulfill us and to prepare us where we're at. And here's the awesome thing. You don't have to know about it. It's happening. It's happening with each and every person here. You think, oh, I've maybe God put a purpose in me. Let's say let's build a Christian, and the Christian all of a sudden accepts the Lord, and all of a sudden he's like me, or she's like me, and all of a sudden, boom, they start saying, I'm going to sing one day, and they're going to sing one day, and then all of a sudden, with all the fervor and youthful ambition, they go and try to be the singer, and try to go out there and try to put those things, but they haven't learned maturity. They haven't learned authority. They haven't learned about the Holy Spirit and the power that can come through their talent. And they haven't learned these things. Well, guess what? There's a level of preparation that needs to take place. And I'm not talking about like you having to go to Bible school. Those are good things. But I'm talking about just natural progression towards what God has given you. The fact is, God prepares us where he finds us, where we are. So don't think like this. And this is a very also that God has prepared you and anointed you with something and a vision to take part, to preach, and then you're like looking around and no one lets you preach or no one lets you do these things. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm leaving this place because it doesn't let me grow. It doesn't let me do these things. What did I say initially? God prepares you where you are. Where you are is very important, because a lot of times we tend to think these things. We tend to think, oh, he prepared me and now I got to go to China or I got to go do it. It's like, hey, you can pray for the person right next to you right now. You can learn to speak to the person right next to you right now. It was like, there is places where you will be taken to do that work. But right now, you have a family that you can speak to. Like I remember when I came to the Lord, none of my family was Christian. So one of the first things that I could do was speak to them or give them an example of who I am, because God had planted me to be used there. And that's where we can find the majority of our preparation, right where we're at. So if you're here and you're saying, I'm not growing, there's things like this, like I want to do these things, I was like, hold up, you might not be ready. And if you go somewhere else, watch, there's not going to be much difference. The grass is not greener on the other side. And I'm going to say it, it's the same grass everywhere. I can point out and give you so many examples of people who have done the same thing, who do that and uproot themselves from where they were purposely found to go somewhere else, and they're doing the exact same thing they were doing here before. As a matter of fact, it took them months to get to there. God prepares us where we are. Second point, God prepares us with what we have. This is important. Sometimes we think preparation means we need more, that we need to be ready. Have you ever heard that person that you're inviting them to church and they're like, I'm not ready? Or you tell them, pray with me. No, I'm not ready. I'm not going to do those kind of things. You know, I've come to terms with the idea that we're never fully ready for anything that comes our way. Consider a Olympic swimmer who works their entire life to get to the Olympics. They start when they're 3 years old, 4 years old, and something builds inside of them, that ambition plus that desire to succeed at the highest level. And before you know it, they spend 15 years dedicating all their time to prepare for the Olympics, to prepare to try to win gold. They spend all that time. And if you think about it, some of them win and some of them don't. You see, God prepares us with what we have and the tools that we have currently. If God being God isn't limited by our human limitations. So if you're over here saying that you're not ready because you're just not ready, well, remember who God is. God is not a God who's limited by you're not ready. And if he was limited by you're not ready, then he wouldn't be God. You see, the very nature of God tells us that he can overcome your biggest deficiencies. You see, we keep asking God, what do I need to do to be ready? While God in his infinite wisdom can do it with what we already have in our hands, or what we've already learned. Let's go to Exodus chapter 4. and we're going to read 1 through 5. I'm also reading King James Version, just so you know. Exodus 4, chapters 1 through 5. I call this verse, "What is in your hand?" And Moses answered and said, "But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord has not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, What is in thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee." Moses is explaining everything he doesn't have. He keeps telling God all the things that he doesn't have. They won't believe that you've come to me. They won't believe. And all God asks them is, "What's in your hand?" And what did he have in his hand? He had a rod. Okay. He had a stick. Now, fantasy, modern day movies makes us believe that this rod probably looked purposeful. But think about every stick you've ever picked up in the wood. It's either too crooked, or it goes like this and then goes back like that. Some of them are too tall. We think that it's going to be like this stick with this big diamond on it, and we can do all kinds of stuff with it. But no. Think about a stick you just pick up, a common thing. And I know I've been in the woods and I've, fantasized about things. Anytime I find a stick that's like long and tall, like I pick it up and I love it. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I love this stick. But it has all these imperfections and all these things. And it's just an ordinary stick, an ordinary rod. A shepherd's tool, if you will, something to push things in one way and push things in another, but just a rod. But just a rod surrendered in God's hands has an extraordinary assignment. So your talents and the tools that you currently have and the things that you know to do in God's hand is extraordinary for God's purpose. It's only what you have access to. Now, I want you to think about this. What is it that God has in your hands right now? Some of you are parents, so it might be your children. I would say to those parents who are here, look at how extraordinary your children are and extraordinarily used by God because of the work that you did, building them up and teaching them about the Lord. If you're parents to young kids, think about the extraordinary lives they're going to live because you allowed them to learn about God early in age. If you're one of those people like me who came to the Lord later in your life, think about the knowledge and experience you have to be able to carry out God's purpose. Think about that phone that just fell, that's in your hand, that you can use to text somebody and tell them what God means to them. Think about your school and your intelligence and your work ethic and all that, and how that story tells the story of God, because if they know that you're one of them, if you're with God, then they'll know that you're different and you'll be able to show that testimony. God works with what's in your hand. Some of you have a pen right now and you're writing notes. Think about what that pen can actually mean in the hands of someone using it for God's purpose. What did it mean to the apostles who were writing the story of Jesus? Because of them, we actually have content that allows us to connect with the living God. It was just a rod. Maybe God has already given you something, a testimony, an experience, an ability, a personality, a voice, creativity, a relationship. All these things can be something that God can use to an extraordinary agenda in the lives of the people around you. Now, I'm a man of faith and a man of vision. And when God reveals something to me, I look at it and look at it strongly. And I also analyze, because a lot of times when God produces a vision or something in us, we need to check it against the Bible and against His Word, against the vision of our spiritual leaders, and we need to understand that there's an order of things. And one of the things that happened to me years ago was like I was just standing like just like this, giving a message, giving a normal message to some young people, and then all of a sudden I saw something in the back of my mind. It had nothing to do with what I was preaching about, but I saw, and I've told this story before. I saw a map, and then all of a sudden I knew in that moment I'm going to preach somewhere else. It just a flood of knowledge came into me. I'm going to preach somewhere else. I'm going to go somewhere and give the message. And at that time, I kid you not, God had been preparing me with messages, and I had like 2 or 3 notebooks full of messages that I was writing before I ever gave one. And I was just writing and learning and doing all that work way before I would be at work. And my work was kind of simple. I would just sit there and I would just be writing these messages over and over, making them better, doing new ones anytime something came. And I remember that this level of preparation was kind of what God had for me, and He put in my hands. But a lot of it wasn't really being used. A lot of it was like when they give me an opportunity, waiting for someone to give me an opportunity, all these things. And I was already, in a certain extent, leading with youth, but I was only preaching probably once every 3 months or so, like that, once every 4 months. Now, if you think about it, in a year, that means I'm preaching 3 or 4 times a year. It was fine. I was always grateful when they gave it, but I had notebooks full of things, and I had all these things, and I remember just giving a message and giving a devotional, and all of a sudden I saw that, and then I was like, I left there and I said, I'm going to preach in another country, so I need to be ready. And I remember one of the first things I went home and I did is I went to go look for my passport. Got the passport, looked at the date, it's still good, okay, ready. And I put that aside. And then I was just like, where am I going to go? And how do I get there? And back then I didn't have any money, so it wasn't like I could just do that. And nowadays they have these organizations that help you go to missions and do all these things. But 20 years ago, that was very much in its infancy, so people weren't really doing that. But I remember that in my conversations, there was a guy here that constantly said that he would go preach in Mexico. I was like, well, I need to jump on that train. So I went to him and I talked to him and I asked him, hey, when's the next time you're going to Mexico? He said, well, I haven't been, maybe 6. Things are kind of bad over there. And I said, I know that, but I need to go. And he said, okay, well, I'll let you know because of this. And I'm over here doing the preparation part and doing this because I saw a vision of a map, and I was like, I'm going to go preach somewhere, and I was like doing all these things. And then one day, all of a sudden, Pastor Ismael Martinez's dad calls me in and says, I need you to go to Mexico with Junior. I was like, okay. I wasn't thinking about the preaching. He was like, I need you to go to Mexico with Junior. Junior has some work he needs to do over there. Can you please be there? I was like, got it. Whatever y'all need me to do. They got me a ticket. All of a sudden, we were flying into Guadalajara and going over there. And a pastor from the church in Cristo Viene, Mexico, picks us up. And then we're having lunch. And then all of a sudden, he looks at me, Junior, and the other guy, and he says, so which one of you guys is preaching this Sunday? Like that. And they both were like, they pointed at me. And I was like, I'll do it. I just need an internet cafe or something because I didn't bring my Bible. We weren't there to do that. And then he was like, okay, we have some place for you to prepare. And guess what? Like it was meant to happen. 3 days after getting there to Guadalajara, I was preaching at the church in Mexico, just like that. God prepares us with what we have. I didn't need to go look for my passport. I didn't need to prepare things. I didn't need to talk to this guy. God was going to do it anyways. He prepared us with what I had in my hand. The right tool, the right tools. Now, my third point, God prepares us in what we are doing. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 19, it says this. So he departed thence and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he was the 12th. And Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle upon him. We already talked about where Elisha was, what he was doing. He was plowing. Think about what plowing requires. What we say, patience, consistency, strength, direction, going the right way. You don't plow 12 rows at a time. You plow 1 or 2. You have to keep going. You have to do the whole field. What I say, not 10 acres, but probably more like 100, 200. You got to keep pushing, keep going to work. And Elisha did not know that the discipline he was developing behind every plow was preparing him for something greater. Elijah thought he was prepping soil. God was preparing his prophet. You may not understand what your current assignment is, but it's something that is developing through what you're doing right now. Now, do you think it's coincidence? Some of you who are in music ministry, do you think it's coincidence that you're serving in music ministry? Do you think it's just chance? Do you think it's just chance that you learned how to play the drums when you were 4 years old, maybe wrong? Or that you used to sing out loud when you were 6 years old at your school concerts and stuff like that? Do you think that's coincidence? I was like, no, God is using what you know for his holy purpose at the end of the day. Now I'm going to tell you something, but growing up, you know how they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? Like, I was a very normal guy, like super normal. There was nothing extraordinary about me. There was nothing extraordinary. I listened to my parents. I did my homework every day. I even did work with my dad every day. Like I remember I'd get home from school and the first thing he'd say, ponte ropa de trabajar. Since I was 5 years old. Like since I was 5. Ponte ropa de trabajar, which means put on work clothes. Eventually I started getting homework. So I tried to pull this like, tengo tarea que hacer. I have homework to do. And he would just reiterate, ponte ropa de trabajar, necesito tu ayuda. And I was over there, a 6-7-year-old boy, moving things and digging holes. And I remember my uncles used to say, ¿Qué está haciendo Juanito allá? Like that's Juanito is like little Juan. That was me. It was like, what is he doing over there? It was like digging a hole that his dad told him to dig because his dad told him to dig it. My dad would never give me context of what we were doing, like ever. So he'd always tell me, you're going to learn by doing. And I'm not that kind of learner. I need to know what we're doing. But he would never tell me anything. So he would just make me do it. So I came off every time talking about my dad's work as I was his slave. Like he would just tell me, go get that, go do that, go do this, go do that. And I was just doing everything. And I would ask him, ¿Qué estamos arreglando? He said, tú nomás mira, vas a aprender. Just look, you're going to learn. I was like, I don't know how to pull dents out of cars. I remember doing that. I don't know how to fix radiators. I remember doing that. I don't know how to fix roofs. I remember doing that. And who knows why I was digging those holes, because they're not there anymore. But I was doing what my father sent me to do. And Elisha was doing what his father had sent him to do. Plow, prepare. Don't take the people who prepared you to be where you're at for granted, because they're setting you up for God's given purpose. Your parents are there trying to direct you. They're trying to align with you. The worst thing that we can do as Christians is disconnect from that purpose we've been given this whole time. And if God showed you how to do something during your youth and he's using that for the future, then guess what? You're going to be all the better for it. And like I said, I grew up a normal kid just listening to my dad. But in the back of my mind, I was always seeing myself in front of people. Always. And for a time, I was like, I'm going to be a politician. And then I was like, no, that can't be the vision. That can't be what I'm seeing. I was like, I'm going to be a judge. Okay, I can be a judge and then become a politician. And then I would try to map things out. And I was like, I got to get good grades so that I can become a lawyer, so I can be a judge, so I can be a politician.